compelled to go back to the drawing board and think about, as was said, that we should categorize universities on the basis of research, no research, teaching, technical teaching, or whatever. In my opinion, I beg to differ from that particular thought, because there is a set definition of a university. And if you look into the dictionary definition of a university, research cannot be taken away from that definition. Research is a part of the education, knowledge creation, and imparting knowledge. So therefore, by now, more than 90% of our students are deprived of research environment in the colleges where, barring a few colleges, of course, from here and there, we can see some research at the college level, but these are very, very small numbers. So in my opinion, first and foremost, concentration, focus should be on the college education than at the university education. Even though all these colleges claim to be part of the universities, and the students, when they come out with their degrees, write the name of the university, not the college, but it is not in true sense the fact. So if we go back to those college level enrollment and we go a little backwards and see where are these students coming from, there lies the problem. We don't have the environment, the ecosystem of research at the grassroots level. I don't mean to say that there should be laboratories in the schools down the line to create knowledge, but there has to be an information and there has to be a contact for the students at that level to know that there is something called research, and that is where perhaps the opportunity lies. When I was working in CSIR, so was Professor B.B. Dhar, we were supposed to organize, we were supposed to actually own at least 50 schools in each state at 9th and 10th standard level, and bring to the labs more than about maybe 500 to 600 students every year and give them an exposure of what is research and give them opportunity to ask questions. I think this process was started by Professor Murali Manohar Joshi in his time when he was HRD minister and was also heading science and technology. And we realized that it was indeed a pleasure to have students. Of course, the selection process was very difficult, and there will be always top 10% students who can excel in any environment. And unfortunately, we would always pick up those students because we had to have some kind of a cutoff. But believe me, that interaction, about half a week and then perhaps extended up to 1 week, at the end of the day, the directors of the institutes would sit with them and ask them about their reaction. And all the time, the final word would be that we are excited, that we have seen what exactly, how research is thought and done. But not even 1% of them would finally say that I would like to be a researcher. That was the paradox. Finally, perhaps 10% of them would end up as the researchers because they would not get, into some of the best colleges and universities. But at that point of time, they would say it's an excellent area, excellent excitement for a student, but we would not like to get into research as a profession. So therefore, it was very clear to us. That is why we do not find the quality that we want in our research organizations or at the universities. Perhaps time has come when we have to go backwards. We have to think about right from that starting point where the change has to come. I think Department of Science and Technology has very recently, in the last 3-4 years, tried to create an environment where students from all over the country would be collected, given opportunity to come and project their thoughts through the small experiments that they might have done back home. But that is a very small initiative, and which is not taking off as a mission of this country. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I must congratulate Association of Indian Universities and ASSOCHAM for even for a while coming together and creating this opportunity for people to sit at some place. We may not agree to each other's point of view. There will be very hardcore educationists who have come through a very rigid regimes over the time, and they may not like to change the pedagogy that we are supposed to go through in the colleges and the universities. But my personal experience of being at the interface of education and research all my life, more inclined to research than to pedagogy, I had realized that we are good in, not good in both, because we have put them apart. For years, when I was sitting on the committees to pick up students for doctorate and postdoctoral level for CSIR, it was an appalling condition. We could hardly find a spark among the students who would come and face the boards. They would always look for somebody to guide them, to select a problem. They would never come forth and say that I have thought about this problem and I would like to work on this. It would be either prepared by their mentor somewhere, or a teacher, or somebody else, and they would look forward to a hand-holding thereafter as well. That is the fundamental difference, in my opinion, between what we see in West and what we see in India. Ironically, I have seen that even though we are comparing ourselves with China all the time and saying that how India is placed as far as science ecosystem is concerned, we do find that up to 1995, we were more or less going parallel. in the output of research. If you look in the terms of publications and the patents. But perhaps that was a watershed for China. And if you see the difference between the growth between 95 and today, they are 4 times ahead of us. And there's no looking back for them. We have slowed down tremendously, even though we are as this statistics was given or the statements were given that we are doing extremely well. But comparatively, we are not doing well at all. If you are producing 30,000 publications in a year, how can you compare with 120,000 or 140,000 of China? So I believe this is an opportunity created, a platform created where we should fearlessly and openly discuss. It's very difficult for us to discuss it at the university forum, because if you look through some of the reports that have come from fairly good educationists of this country, they call universities as the storehouse of dead wood. And so it is true of the research institutions, because as the saying goes that 20% work for 80%, and that is what is happening in this country all over. I think we have to have some kind of a parallel mechanism, 2 kinds of systems within the same system, where the people who have spark in them are let free to move forward. Not in that departmental manner, the way which we are handling our education and research at the universities. I thank Professor Furqan for giving this opportunity to me at this point of time, because some of you may leave for the first session itself, but I will perhaps share some further thoughts in the afternoon. Thanks a lot once again for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Kazi. I think you basically are still a scientist, though now you have a bigger role to play as Vice Chancellor of the Ahmedabad University. Let me just say a few more experiences that we have at ASSOCHAM in regard to bringing the spark in the students. A few years ago, we had brought to ASSOCHAM Mr. Craig Venter from USA. He's the only first one to have created the sequencing of the human genome. We took him to meet Mr. Mashelkar, and he went to and interacted with the CSR scientists, and he selected some 15 scientists in a few hours, and they were all taken to the US, and they did wonderfully well thereafter. So what is needed is really sometimes, we don't know where the spark is, and how do we create that spark into a blooming candle, and how can we bring the real talent out of the person that we are looking at. The other thing that we are talking about is, Professor Kazi, I entirely agree with you that I believe that the universities have to play an important role in terms of bringing the research through the faculty and the students. They have to continuously do so. We are not doing enough to give the funds for the research by the faculty. We do not send them out. We do not provide them interactive modules. So there is something basically that we need to do to see that the research is promoted in India, and we take up new innovations. I'm chairperson of Ramjas College. So one day I invited Professor Dinesh Singh to the college, and we were talking about as to what's happening in the university, what kind of students are we creating, what kind of BAs, MAs we are bringing out, and do they find jobs. In Delhi University, the cutout is 90%. So after 90%, once they pass out, and if they don't get the jobs, or if they don't find the opportunities, it's pathetic. So I said, how about we interact more on a more continuous basis with industry? So I said, are we teaching what is happening in retail today? Are we talking about logistics? If you have a mobile, which is a smartphone today, and now the person is looking at mobile and he's punching, and he wants that shirt, jeans, perfume in 24 hours at his home. So are we teaching logistics today? He says, no. So I said, let's do something about it to say that we change the curriculum in terms of what the industry wants. And that's where I think we have to see that we continuously, as I said in my opening remarks, academia and the industry has to work together. With this, may I now request a very distinguished person to please address us, Dr. Bhanu Mehta, who is head of the CPR. We know that he's a very distinguished economist, and he is most sought after by the academia, by the industry, by the government. It is an honor to have you with us, sir. Please. Please welcome Dr. Mehta.
It's a great privilege to be here and humbling in the presence of so many eminent educationists and particularly members on the dais. It's a great initiative by ASSOCHAM and AIU, and I must congratulate Professor Furqan Kumar for taking over AIU. He's a very distinguished leader in education, and we hope AIU will flourish under your leadership. I'm not known to be polite, so I will be quite intemperate. It's not directed at particular individuals, but let's be very clear. If we want to break new ground, Indian higher education will have to break a few heads first. Okay? For the last 15, 20 years, we have been going around in circles, expressing the same pieties, and we can tick off the list. We have to start at primary education. We are not even measuring what poor children are learning. How are we going to create higher education? We have to merge teaching and research, funding, autonomy to whom, who knows what. Every single document ticks off everything that needs to be done. Right? The bad news is, and let's first begin with the bad news. Okay? Yes, there are pockets of excellence. Yes, there is a young generation of people coming up that is dying to do things. I don't share the pessimism about the young generation. People don't want to go into research and so forth. It's simply not true empirically. Okay? But what we have created is a gigantic institutional elephant called higher education that is crushing their creativity, crushing their hopes and aspirations. And we have to ask the question, who is responsible for this? And how do we unshackle this creativity that is bubbling up and forth? You can go to, people say people don't want to, go into research and social sciences. You can go to small towns in India and do workshops and 500 young kids will show up. Okay? You can go to any university, universities, public universities where classes are not held 3/4 of the year. But if there is a good teacher who convinces the students that he's taking them seriously, students will show up. Students are never the problem in any education system. Let's make it very clear. We have let them down. Okay? So where do we begin? Right? Now, when we talk of an ecosystem of research, and I'll limit myself to research, there are lots of things to be said about teaching. I'll just make 2 or 3 remarks on research. Fundamentally, we have to recognize that an ecosystem of research is an ecosystem of trust, social trust, right? When I rely on a scientist to tell me are GM foods safe or not, I'm trusting them, right? There's asymmetry of information here. Only they can tell me whether it's safe or not. There are some mechanisms to make sure that they are being honest and accountable. But fundamentally, a system of education and a system of research is a system of trust. Okay? If the system does not evoke trust, even if there are bright individuals within it, some creative groups in it, their social credibility will be relatively lower. More importantly, a system of trust is also a signaling device. Right? Some of you are heading good institutions. Why do students come to your institution? Lots of reasons, good education and so forth. But fundamentally, the reason they're coming to your institution is because when they walk out with a piece of paper from your institution, it evokes some trust. I have a degree from X university, so society can assume I will not be below a certain threshold of competence. Okay? The fundamental crisis in Indian research is that this system of trust is completely broken. Okay? That doesn't mean that there aren't people doing good work. What it means is there is no way of signaling that they are doing good work. Today, if I can speak of the social sciences, if a student walks up to me and says, I have a PhD from JNU or Delhi University, my response is, it could be brilliant, or it could be 3/4 plagiarized. That is the range of variation you're talking about. Okay? So the question before us is, how do you restore credibility to this system? Okay? Because if you don't have that credibility, it doesn't matter how good your work is. There is probably a lot of good scientific work that actually doesn't get noticed because you don't know, you're not in a position to judge its quality.